Good to go.
Second.
All right, welcome to the Sunbury Services meeting, May 4th, 2022. Can I get a roll call, please?
John Grumney,
Here.
Damon Capel,
Here.
Murray Neff,
Here.
Joe St. John.
Here. And I will make a motion to approve the minutes from the April 6th meeting. Can I get a second? Second. Roll call?
John Grumney,
Abstain.
Damon Capel.
Yes.
Murray Neff,
Yes.
Joe St. John.
Yes. Do not have any scheduled visitors and no new business, which is a little change of pace. So I guess we get right into the fun stuff with the 2022 street program.
So in your packet, we included the map of the areas that we're going to resurface, primarily Kentner and South Columbus with a little bit of work in the cemetery. We've also set aside money to do some brick repair. And I think those bids are due next week.
Wednesday.
Next
Yes.
Wednesday. We're hoping for good bids, and we'll see. It's a uncertain time, but a busy time for contractors. Uncertainty about materials and busy. So not the best. It's a seller's market, I guess, if you put it in moving terms. So
Similar to last year or worse.
I don't know. We'll see.
Okay. I suppose so.
Did we include the delivery time, like where we did? Great.
In August 12th, I think the teachers start on the 15th and then the students for the following Monday. So,
Thank you.
yes.
All right, I saw in the notes the street sweeping. So we have contractors, but no estimates.
Yes, so we included in the packet the information that we were sending out to prospective bidders. So I think I sent it out to maybe 5 or 6 companies. I know 2 are actively working on putting together a price. I would anticipate we'll get something here by the end of the week. We'll be able to come back to the committee with some pricing information there soon. I know, so we've asked for a per or lump sum price for each time that they sweep the streets. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, we can ultimately decide how many times we want them to sweep the streets. But anyway, so that's kind of where we are at the moment. I did attach, because the question came up, could you help us understand the street system a little bit? I did include a copy of an older map. We've subsequently put together a list of the city streets that we can share with the contractors. So, yeah, so hopefully we'll have something soon.
Okay, and that's this color-coded one that went with the street sweeping, right?
Yeah.
What does the color?
Yeah, I was gonna say, and I've told the contractors.
I don't see a rhyme or reason to it.
Pay no attention to the numbers or the colors. That's connected to the pavement condition assessment that was done a couple of years ago.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Okay, and then street striping.
Brad's working on our map. Then I need to take, I've asked him to give me meets and bounds in terms of where he feels we need painting. And then from there, we can get we have what we want. So he's working on that. I think we'll do striping last. We don't want to stripe over and then have crack sealing come through. So
Right.
we'll sweep, we'll crack seal, then we'll stripe. And again, the goal will be to get that all done before school starts, where traffic gets a lot more challenging. In terms of crack sealing, Mr. Hall's connected me in with a potential vendor. Again, Brad's working on a list. That one's going to be more of a linear. I think we'll end up buying by the gallon applied, but we'll be again giving them a map of priorities. And I see Cherry Street needing it. I see Granville needing it. I see a little bit on Miller Drive that would probably benefit from it. We've got one area that in front of the apartment complex where it's starting to kind of gator crack, get that gator back look to it, which is not a good situation. And then I'll wait and see what other streets Brad proposes for that. But those are the ones that I drive, that I see where it would certainly benefit from that.
Is there a best practice that other municipalities or the county does? I mean, similar to like taking a pavement condition report and getting a program together, or is it like, I mean, I see it a lot more, at least, and maybe I'm not looking at it through the right lens, but I'll have to start marking where I'm thinking we can benefit from this. But Wes, do you have any thoughts on like what other municipalities do?
Yeah, I mean, Steve and Daryl and I were talking. I mean, it would be, you know, the more you put in that crack seal preventive maintenance pot, the better. So any crack on any asphalt pavement to keep water out of the base is a good thing. So whatever you can do to, you know, escalate that preventive maintenance funding is very worthwhile, because it prevents that asphalt from failing. And so, yeah, as much as you can afford to crack seal, I would highly recommend it.
Is crack sealing strictly a once a year thing, or is it something you can do like at the beginning, like in spring and then again in fall?
Spring and fall are actually better times to do that, when the cracks are wider, because the pavement will contract. When it heats up, it expands and the crack gets smaller. And then when it cools, it contracts and the crack gets larger. So it's actually, you know, and that's right now is fine. I mean, you can crack seal. We recommend a type 2 crack seal, which has the fiber in it. So it has a little small pieces of polyester fiber, and that helps to bridge that. And it's pretty elastic, but yeah, you can crack seal anytime there's a temperature, you know, I think it's 40 or 45. You know, you don't want to crack seal below that. But yeah, so that's more preventive maintenance is better. Absolutely.
Then the gallon, I get the cost per unit. We're going to be paying by the gallon, and depending on how big the crack is, depends how many linear feet you can go. But do we have at this point, do we have a good idea of, you know, based on, I don't know, Granville Street in particular, where we're starting to get, you know, like a 4-inch crack in there, how much sealing are we talking about?
It's really depending on the extent of the crack.
Right.
So the two ways to bid it is by the square yard and let the contractor look at it and estimate it. And then by the pound or the gallon. And, you know, there you just have to watch to make sure they're not over applying it. If you do it by the square yard, you got to be there to make sure that they put enough on. So it's just a matter of balance there. By the gallon or pound is a good way to go, you know, and then it just depends on the number of cracks that, you know, that particular section has. It's kind of difficult to estimate. If it's a long linear type crack, you can estimate that. But if it's multiple cracks in a section, you know, they're just gonna go. But yeah, I mean, we have ways of estimating that based on. We've actually done it with aerial photography as well, you know, for a whole city to look at pavement maintenance, condition rating, and then crack sealing, mill and fill, other types of. So you have a pavement rating that you went through.
Right.
I'm interested to see the road biotics information as well.
I am too.
Like to take a look at that, and we can work together to come up with a plan there to identify, you know, which streets are crack seal candidates, which streets are mill and fill candidate, and so on.
It's hard for me to say that, yeah, we're going to do all the streets without having some sort of cost. It's also, on the other hand, I think at least like the common sense, logical sense of it is that anything we're doing to prevent having to do like a full mill and fill of a street where you're tearing up, in some cases, good pavement because of the worst condition portion of a street. I think like Miller Drive a few years ago when we did it, it was like there were sections that definitely, I mean, were very bad. But there are other sections that like up around the neighborhood that weren't as bad, but we replaced the whole street.
I could take a look at it and just say for, a moderately cracked street to see what a center line linear foot cost would be just for estimating purposes. We could do a light, a moderate. If it's heavily cracked, then you have to go to a different option. So it's going to be in the light moderate range and come up with a linear center line, foot that we could estimate with. Yeah, I could do that.
And do other municipalities or like, what size do we need to get before we start bringing something like this in-house? And how complicated is that?
In Wellington, we did it ourselves, and we were less than 5,000 people.
Okay.
Oftentimes, depending on the vendor, they'll either loan you the piece of equipment for a period of time if you buy their materials. Our approach there was, well, we had concrete streets, so we had to continuously,
Right.
we had it in 4 segments, but every 4 years, those seams were getting filled. And we had a couple summer employees and then one responsible full-time employee that kind of headed up the crew. And it's very doable. It's just, I think when I talked with Brad, they were doing it, but then it was like, are you going to do this? You're going to mow. And then
Right.
they start crack sealing, and then somebody's like, okay, mowing's getting out of control. So
Right.
we need to ramp up the number of summer employees we'd have, and maybe even a full-time employee, or at least have a good full-time employee we're comfortable with sending the crew out. But it's doable, and we could probably look at what we spend this year and then use that as kind of a benchmark to look at what if we did it ourselves and what it would cost.
Gut tells me that our streets over the past 2 or 3 years, on average, have deteriorated, like including the ones that we've repaired. I mean, if we took like the total area of Sunbury and did a new pavement condition report, I almost guarantee our metrics have gone down. Not only are we expanding roads, more traffic, we haven't done any preventative maintenance the past couple of years that I'm aware of. Yeah. Okay.
Just given the sheer price tag of these street programs every year,
Mhm.
it seems reasonable that you at least look at the spend on patching, on crack sealing, and seeing where we could end up with that. Because that could pay off in spades if we plan ahead for it on some of these annual street programs.
Mhm.
I always like to make the analogy with paint and wood siding. If you keep the paint up, then the wood siding stays in place. If the paint fails, not caulking, painting, then the wood siding will rot and you got to replace the siding. And that's kind of a mill and fill or a full depth replacement. So that's where the expense goes up.
The question that I have is how much does proper crack sealing push back the need for full mill and fill, or is it significant?
It is, because you keep that water out of the base because, the asphalt is going to crack. Asphalt life on the average 10 to 15 years. I mean, it does oxidize. The emulsion in the asphalt mix will oxidize, it'll dry. You can put rejuvenators and things on it to help keep that. I use an analogy there, a hand cream, to basically keep that rejuvenated. So there are other, full width type products outside of crack seal that you can apply to help keep that asphalt, but 15-year would be a max, 10-year would be a good placeholder number for asphalt that you just want to think about. So you could easily take your center line miles of roadway, condition rate it, look at a cost, figure out what you have to spend on an annual basis to keep it up at a certain rating, and that's an easy calculation. Sometimes it's a shocking number, but you want to at least see what that number is and then kind of benchmark,
Right.
look at funding, see what you can do on the preventative maintenance side. There's a lot of good cost curves on the preventive maintenance side where when you apply those products and the costs you spend. And that's a little bit of education for the residents, because you're spending money on what looks like a newer street versus the older streets that you got to catch up on, but it makes that asphalt last longer on those 5-year-old type pavements. So
It's like changing the oil in your car or your furnace filter or having your ducts cleaned or whatever. It's like, if you don't do it, not only is it going to deteriorate, but you're putting more stress on the underlying technology that makes it work. And ultimately your fan's going to break in your furnace.
When we had the street plan done up.
Yeah.
I don't think preventive maintenance was a part of that at
Well,
all,
no.
was it?
It was
So,
just a replace at that point. It was like, and we were already, I want to say, like on a path at $500,000 or $700,000 investment at 3 year ago dollars. We were like, this is going to take us 22 years to do this. And that's longer than the asphalt life. So you're instantly behind where you need to be. And I don't know. I was looking at our finances earlier, and I think it's no surprise that we're growing, our fastest growing city in Central Ohio. Last year, our income tax was up 8% versus the previous year, pandemic year. But even from 2019 normal to 2021, it was 7.8% up. So, and this year, don't quote me on this, but I think we're at like 10 to 15% up. So what I'm saying is, if we're going to make up any ground, we're going to have to invest more in the underlying infrastructure. That's for sure.
We need a preventative maintenance schedule. Yeah. Okay, that's a good topic for future discussion then, I suppose.
We're going to have quotes back sometime in the next month or so then to get it done by August.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
No, I mean, is the crack sealing we've had done in the last few years relevant too, to look back and start to see a little bit of trend analysis of this? What the costs are, how much we had done, so that we can project it forward a little?
I know that.
Because we did have crack sealing done last year, didn't we? No? Am I
Yeah.
thinking back?
It hasn't been done since I've been here.
And since I've been on city council, we haven't done.
I swore we talked about it. Okay, well,
I think we did.
I'm imagining the other city council that I'm part of, I guess. So.
I guess
Not sure we had talked
when
about
we
it.
go out to bid, I prefer to put out a larger bid and trim it back if we can, or something. I don't know if that's going to mess up the contract price, but I hate getting caught in a situation where we're saying, hey, let's do 3 streets, and as the years progressing, we're like, oh my gosh, if we could have got these 5 more or 6 more or whatever it was for 15 grand or 25 grand, are we saving years worth of time on deteriorated pavement? I don't know. There's a mathematical calculation here. I don't know what that is. I don't have the numbers.
I think I would usually err on the side of preventative maintenance over waiting for repairs, though. That's just a lean way of looking at it. Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, Miller Drive flooding.
Still a mystery.
It's a loop.
It's still happening.
It is a loop. Right? Mr. Parkinson had looked at it and scratched his head. The only other Yeah, thing beyond what, well, there's two things we can do. One, we can attempt to jet that area and see if we had an accumulation of something that causes it. But ultimately, the way the pipe routing looked, it's almost like a diamond. It's just a closed loop. So eventually we've got to figure out a way to get it away from there and off into our stormwater system, swale or something. So Wes plan on spending a little time, dust off Dave's little map that shows the diamond, which was what I saw, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
You said jetted out. Did you mean like the vac truck?
Yeah.
Okay.
We actually were having an issue, North Street, and thought it was related to paving, and some of it might be, but what we found, we went in there and jetted that storm, and I didn't see it yesterday or last night when we had the big rains, but we're kind of monitoring it, but it's flowing now again, and it wasn't flowing when they started to jet it. So it's possible that's at least part of the culprit there. So I made a note to myself to put that on Brad's list of getting around and try to jet it.
Could you, in 20 seconds, could you explain what jetting is? I'm not sure
We have it's a combination, it's called a combo unit. It has a vacuum on it with, like a 4-inch vacuum. And it also carries water with it that you can use various nozzles, put it into a sewer, run it up a sewer or a storm line. And some of the nozzles just spray water, some of them, the water action spins them. It's just a way to debride a pipe. And, if there's a clog, it will dislodge that clog.
You've probably seen the truck. I think it's the biggest piece of equipment we own.
Yeah.
It's a big white, huge truck. That has a big white tube that kind of runs on the top and massive. It's very expensive. I want to say it's like $190,000 or something like that. Sorry.
Yeah,
Dave.
I was just gonna say, when we took you on a site visit at the wastewater plant, we did not actually go into the building, but we're parked at home, so maybe we could take a picture and send it.
He'll come out and run it.
Sure.
Water your yard pretty quick.
Thank you.
Google up backhaul or backcon truck. So that's curious.
Yeah, there.
And then let's have.
So Dale's been able to secure one quotation for doing 2-point repairs. The sewer there, the depth is pretty extensive to where whoever excavates is going to have to bring in an excavation box, a metal box that fits in the trench box. Maybe even a trench box and a half, because I forget, he said it was at least 15 feet, maybe 20.
15.
Yeah, so it's pretty deep, which, it costs more for the one to get down to it, and costs more because you've got to mobilize more equipment, including the trench box. The other kind of twist that he found was that there's a gas line that runs over the top of the sewer. There's some separation, but to get from here to there, you've got to maneuver your way around a gas line. So I think he put that price, I think his quote was rounding up was about $39,000.
I have it up right here. The one from Zimmerman was $36,000, $35,880. Didn't include asphalt though in his bid.
Yeah.
And then the other one, I haven't seen that one.
He hasn't gotten the second.
Oh,
one
he hasn't
yet.
got the second one,
He's
okay.
still, he met with someone on the site, they looked at it, but he hasn't gotten a bid back from them. In his email this morning, he raised the question of, is for this price, are we then, making a good down payment on actually lining the sewer? And David done an estimate of what lining, well, he had a couple side streets lined too, but I don't know if we could reduce that just to Let's Avenue and see what that lining cost is, because we may be at a point where doing the lining may be a more cost-effective approach, because it's going to solve some of the other minor problems and maybe some unforeseen major problems with that sewer line, as opposed to doing 2-point repairs and then still having a 50 to 100-year-old sewer line probably. So
We still have to do the point repair, but they would do the point repair and the lining. Is that right? Because it's collapsed pipe, right?
we may be able to breach and branch that collapse, depending upon how bad it is and how much it's constricted the pipe. We've done, in Wellington, we had a street that was caving, and we found that it was due to a totally failed section of pipe about this long. Half of it had gone away. And they were able to successfully get the liner through there and cure it. And they didn't have to do the point repair. But we do need to look at that issue to see if.
Is that liner strong enough to push the earth that's crushing that up? That's what you're saying?
I think there was one that had the protruding tap coming in,
I remember that one.
so that has to be cut out.
Right.
And right adjacent to that, I believe, is where the pipe was kind of collapsed on the top. It was broken in, so that would all be just one. The other one, like Steve said, might be able to be just line, but at least 1-point repair, if I recall. I'd have to refresh on that, but there was a fairly major crack along with a protruding tap, so we need to get that tap. But they can also cut that tap out, with a machine, with a remote control cutter, but the pipe was fairly cracked there. We'd have to look at that to see.
Are we to a point where we can possibly say we're just going to replace the pipe either? I mean, is that, because we're in the $250,000 range for a
Full lining.
full lining, trim the stuff.
The estimate had, manhole rehabilitation and lining and what's called a top hat, which goes up into the lateral 10 feet or so. May or may not need to do all that, but yeah, so the thought was, let's try to point repair what's absolutely needed that has to be point repaired, run the camera back through it. And then we also got a downstream problem at the bend by Dave's house. As it goes down, there's some surcharging there. And then the consideration of all of the I&I from the gardens coming through that, just taking a second look to see, all right, if we're gonna line the 8-inch too, we're still going to have a problem, do we need to upsize that pipe potentially? So, that would be a consideration to just take a look at before we spend the money on a liner as well.
That's kind of where I was going with it. I knew we had, that if we fix all of this and we still have a bottleneck.
I wouldn't anticipate, I don't know. I mean, to get those roots cut out, there was like a curtain wall of roots.
Right.
Plus the protruding tap, which
Right.
was blocking 30% of the pipe. I would hope. And if we can go up in the gardens and do a little smoke testing or something and find some things, within the public right of way that can be removed, clean water connection to the sanitary, get on private property, downspouts, yard drains, that's a different topic to broach that. But I would hope it's good enough, but it's a fairly large tributary area to that sewer. So that's a consideration as well. And Steve and I were kicking all that around. So at least we got an initial placeholder on a couple point repairs. It's looks like Mr. Zimmerman's pretty busy. So he
Any infrastructure dollars for this?
OPWC does have an emergency fund. I was back maybe 2010. I remember securing some funds for South Morning Street, which isn't too far from this location, for some emergency funding. And you know, you don't want to cry wolf too much on that fund, but it's been a while since the village has applied for that in the state. So when they do the OPWC fund, they reserve part of that every year statewide. I think it's a couple $1 million that they put in an emergency pot, and you can apply for that, you know, and if you have to prove that it was an emergency, if it's a lack of maintenance and then you're versus an emergency. So this looks like, you know, whenever that pipe did crack, it could be a recent crack there and where it actually created an issue. So that's one idea, and it's grant money as well.
Good one.
It's not a loan.
Steve, can you look into that before the next meeting?
Would make it easier decision to do point repairs and wait and see on the bigger project,
Yeah.
or just take care of the bigger project early.
Right.
Either way, depending on what we could get.
I feel like we have a serious I&I issue there that's contributing to the really what the root cause is, no pun intended, like our, you know, you get what I'm saying. Like, I think there's more water going in that pipe than what is supposed to, whether by accident or whatever.
Right.
And it's compounded by multiple things: protruding pipes, roots, collapsed pipe.
You know, the opinion I have right now is just to spend the least amount possible to just clear the pipe from a protruding tap, a severe, you know, crack in the top, which is a partial collapse. Just get that fixed. Let's reanalyze it, because we got a little work to do down by the bend going down towards Columbus Street, and then the gardens to kind of identify what is tributary as far as infiltration inflow. So that would just give us time and not have any kind of basement backup, hopefully, once the roots are clear and the taps removed and so on.
Do we need to give any authorization now to go ahead and do it? If we get a second bid, I mean, you guys weigh what to do, or have we already appropriated that in this, like within the sewer budget where you could use those funds?
If you have an emergency basis there.
Yeah, I think below 50, we could do it. I don't know that we had budgeted. We could correct that whenever we do an amendment to the budget. And, you know, we'd spell it out that you're increasing because of this reason.
It's possible at the next meeting, we may need to approve a purchase order or something. Is that right? But we've got
Yes.
the money budgeted and appropriated correctly. Sorry to hijack this meeting. I think it's the right move, what you're talking about, Wes, and moving forward with this.
Yeah, let's
It's not a very big ask.
No. Yeah. Let's talk about that.
And the last thing on the agenda is sewer map from CT.
At your last meeting, you had just asked to get an appreciation for our existing system and our
Mhm.
utilities stuff. We provided, or he had provided some maps for you. One's an overall system map that I urge you to open up the PDF that was in the in the electronic, the e-pack, and it's much easier to read because you can blow it up and focus in, but that's our map of utilities.
So impressed. Was this just off the shelf sitting somewhere? Or did you guys create this?
Yeah, we've kept it up to date. It's an AutoCAD, so it has water, storm, and sanitary all on one map. You just kind of update that. Yeah, you really need the PDF to zoom in. If we plot it out full size, it's a pretty big sheet of paper, so. But it's a good quick look to. We've included some of the overhead electric, that main couple of the main runs through town for the large transmission overhead lines as well.
Awesome, Wes.
That is
Thank you.
Really cool. Yeah. One of the things that perpetually surprises me about being on the services committee is how impressed I am with talk about the sewers. So.
You can't grow without sewer.
All right, so do we have anything left for the good of the order? Anybody have any parting questions? We're way ahead of schedule tonight. It's a
I
nice
won't be at the next
change of
meeting.
pace.
I won't be at the June 1st meeting.
I'm trying not to write this. All right, then I'll motion to adjourn.
Second.
Have roll call?
John Grumney,
Yes.
Damon Capel.
Yes.
Murray Neff,
Yes.
Joe St. John.
Yes.